In February in 2023, it looked like a cyclone was coming to Aotearoa. It clobbered Hawke's Bay and it really smashed us here in the Tairāwhiti region.
Homes flooded, thousands of people evacuated, entire regions underwater and completely cut off.
Straight away you're like, this is beyond me. Where do we start? This isn't a job for me, I'm a tractor. This is a big job.
It was that mental health check-in, you know, how are you? Are you okay? And there was a couple of different landowners up here that we were like, wow, this is really bad.
This stuff happens, nature happens, and you have to be prepared for pretty much anything.
Kia ora, I'm Sam the Trapman. I'm the East Coast Tairāwhiti Catchment Coordinator for New Zealand Landcare Trust. I come from a long line of farmers. I just like to look after our rural communities, our rural landscapes, and make sure our communities can farm strong for multiple generations for the future. What we were looking at was a really big piece of recovery work that no one could quite figure out how to deal with yet. At that time, community leaders emerged and those pre-existing catchment and community groups started to act as vehicles to get that step-by-step recovery and stabilisation.
My name is Laura Watson. I'm the project manager for the Waimata Catchment Restoration Project, and I'm also a landowner farmer in the catchment. The year started more with cyclone hail for us, and then 3 weeks later it was Cyclone Gabrielle.
So, I'm Roger Utting, born and bred here in the Waimata Valley. On our family farm, I'm the 4th generation here.
Ray Parsons and my wife Kerry. We've been residing in the valley now for about 5 years.
I'm Lindsay Bates and I'm part of the Ahuriri Tributaries Catchment Group Trust. And we all had, you know, I'd say I've got neighbours who only moved back into their home just before Christmas, which was awful. And we've got another neighbour who's still living in a tent because her home hasn't been repaired yet.
We had no farm tracks left because slips had come through our farm tracks and washed them into the river. Our fences had washed into the river. Our yards and our wool sheds had silt right through them and forestry debris.
It was quite frightening being totally cut off with communication, power, you know, and the roads as well. It was very overwhelming because, of course, we had our own damage on our property and we were trying to get around that. And then just when we sort of thought we were making a bit of progress, we were hit with what they refer to as the son of Cyclone Gabrielle.
You know, there was stuff coming out of the trees and it was just, yeah, we were watching we've got a swing bridge down the bottom and I saw that just getting annihilated by logs coming down the river, and you know, all the floodgates were washed out, all the poles and the cables and the dead men that hold the cable up and all that, and all gone.
Say 8 acres was a metre deep and up to a metre deep in silt. We lost 90% of our fences. Our sheep yards were buried, destroyed.
During the initial first 2 weeks of that time, it was more around that well-being, calling up coordinators.
It doesn't matter how you skin it. Farmers are pretty resilient, tough people. But when you have an event like Cyclone Gabrielle, they start to get knocked around. They'll tell you they were all right, but realistically you could see by the looks on their face that they weren't coping. What we did at New Zealand Landcare Trust was we mobilised really fast. And the beauty of being a small, independent, trusted organisation like the Trust is that we put our hands up and said, hey, if you're keen to donate money, we will get that to real life farmers on the ground right now, this week.
Nobody really knew how things were in our region, but they knew they couldn't get to us and they knew they couldn't communicate with us. Because we were an established catchment group and we'd managed to get word out that we needed help. You know, I had a guy turn up on my doorstep and he was like, hey, I'm DJ, I'm from Paeroa, where do you need me? And that was huge, it was really overwhelming. And then it was church groups from Tauranga got in touch, and then we had digger drivers coming in.
Sam brought the volunteers in, and we were able to prioritise with the important stuff like around the cottage.
We couldn't get into Napier for about 2 days because the water was too deep to get through. So we had no power for, I think it was 12 days.
Really interesting to me to see a catchment group operate during a crisis. Catchment groups are the new school hall community. They're the new social organisation that allows us to have resilient communities.
When the year-long anniversary rolled round, I was actually felt quite triggered. I felt like crying. It was very overwhelming. Being part of this catchment group has been an incredible experience. It's been a lot more than I ever thought it would be, you know. For us to then be in a position where we could actually help our community through a disaster in the way that we could was something I never ever thought was even part of being a catchment group. I think we didn't look after our mental health properly. We both stopped sleeping.
And actually, there was already those lines of communications within those community groups that allowed for that information to be communicated fairly quickly.
We've still got fences down the back sticking out that high from Bowler. So, and now we've got fences beside them from Gabriel, which, yeah. So it was a little bit different, but I would say Gabriel was a lot more damage for us and resurrecting the property, yeah.
You really need to be set up as a proper catchment group, as a charitable trust with all your ducks in. That level of preparedness in the catchment allowed us to bid for money. We wouldn't have got our MPI 4-year funding if we hadn't been set up like that.
Because the catchment groups have formed a community in a lot of the areas.
But yeah, it's how do we set our farming systems up so that when that does happen again, like when that happens again, not if, because I don't think it's going anywhere in a hurry, and we seem to be seeing more and more weather events. So it's not a case of recovery back to the old norm, it's a case of recovery with resilient systems for the future.
You know, like we're only 12 months down the track and we're still doing a few tidying up jobs. Like we're not going to fence to the degree we had it before, because we know that it is going to happen again now, as it's been happening a lot. So yeah, we can expect it to happen again, but we know what we have to do.
How do we support this, and how do we do these things? We got to think ahead on these things, because Gabriel's not a one-off.
Top tip I would give another catchment group is to have a plan.
There's a lot of work to be done, and so you have to prioritise what you do.
A generator is most important, and we are going to get one.
Have a record of who in the neighbourhood has what equipment. So who's got a chainsaw, who's got a tractor, who's got a digger, you know, who's willing to lend or go and do stuff for people, who's got electricity, because you know they've got generators, and therefore can you go and charge your phone battery at so and so's house, because they're happy to do that. So that sort of local community.
Crises bring communities together, and in this case the catchment group was the ultimate strength to deal with Cyclone Gabriel. It would have been completely different without a well-established catchment group, without a really intact community to deal with this local crisis here. I don't know, I think it just showcases the value of catchment groups.